pensioners who will freeze to death, but allowing loads of immigrants into the country. I mean, it doesn't take a great headline writer to put the comparisons together.
Because it's the unfairness of it,
It's
right?
unfair, exactly. So what they're now looking at is whether they are going to increase that allowance, the 11,500 income cut threshold, over which you no longer get the payment, or possibly reversing it altogether. They won't do that. And of course, they're deeply worried about reform. Now, here we go. The same line comes out of Downing Street. We had to take tough but right decisions in the budget to stabilise the economy after years of damage and decline. We all know that's nonsense. We all know the £22 billion hole doesn't exist. We know it's all fabrication. Also, the policy, the energy policy there, is expected to save the government around £1.5 billion a year, but 100,000 pensioners pushed into poverty in a developed country. Not acceptable. Then, of course, they're now going to go after people who've been really good and put money into ISAs because they believe these are really a tax-efficient way to save money, and they are. And now they're saying, well, actually, Rachel Reeves' next big idea is to reduce the limit, which is 20,000 at the moment, that you can put in there in a fiscal year, down to 4,000.
Yes.
Who made this up?
Okay, so this is, I'm not laughing because it's funny, I'm laughing because it's, again, so intellectually incoherent. So apparently the reason...
Will the thresholds remain frozen for 3 years, as the government has already announced?
Well, I would like for taxes on working people to come down, but I'm not going to play fast and loose with the public finances. When a government does that, you get a repeat of what Liz Truss does, and frankly, it's what Rishi Sunak offered in the Conservative manifesto this week, a whole bunch of unfunded, uncosted policies that, if the Conservatives have a chance to enact, will crush our economy in the same way that Liz Truss did.
A startling new investigation into the Chancellor Rachel Reeves has raised serious questions about her expense account when working at HBOS in the run-up to the financial crisis.
The political landscape has just shifted dramatically. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor who drove one of the most forceful inheritance tax reforms in decades, is now facing a legal storm of her own. In a striking reversal, she's no longer shaping the rules, she's confronting them, as a ruling from the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom has frozen millions linked to her inherited estate. The optics are powerful, the champion of sweeping fiscal change now caught in a high-stakes legal battle. What began as a bold policy push has turned into a defining personal challenge, placing her leadership and credibility under an intense spotlight.
Rachel Reeves has raised serious questions about her expense account when working at HBOS in the run-up to the financial crisis. My name's Tom Harwood and this is GBN Originals. We're going to dive into a BBC investigation, freshly published, into the works of the Chancellor before she was a Member of Parliament. Now, of course, we all know for a time Rachel Reeves worked for the Bank of England, but then moving up to HBOS, which of course was Halifax Bank of Scotland before it was broken up in the global financial crisis. She moved to their office in Leeds for a regional job. She has previously been accused of overemphasizing her title at that job as an economist rather than working in retail banking, as her CV now states publicly. But that's not the story here. Indeed, the story here is slightly more concerning, indeed, if not alarming. What the BBC appears to have found is that they've corroborated a number of accounts that there was some sort of investigation into Rachel Reeves and two other managers at HBOS in Leeds into their expense.
While ordinary families scramble to cope with punishing new tax rules, some facing six-figure bills simply for inheriting a modest semi-detached home, Rachel Reeves is under fire over revelations about her own financial arrangements. Newly released documents detail a complex web of offshore accounts, trusts, and pension reallocations that had been operating quietly in the background, redirecting wealth in ways far removed from the reality most taxpayers face. This comes only months after she assured the public that her reforms would impact only the ultra-rich. Yet the figures tell a tougher story. A household earning £20,000 and inheriting a typical semi-detached property could be hit with close to £170,000 in tax. As families brace themselves and cut back to meet the burden, reports suggest her personal fortune was carefully structured to minimize exposure to the very system she championed, a contrast that is fueling serious questions about fairness and trust.
In the budget, I delivered the most ambitious package of measures that we have ever seen to cut down on tax evasion, raising £6.5 billion per year by the end of the forecast. Today, I go further, continuing our investment in cutting-edge technology, investing in the HMRC's capacity to crack down on tax avoidance, and setting out plans to increase the number of tax fraudsters charged every year by 20%. These changes raise a further £1 billion, taking the total revenue raised from reducing tax evasion under this Labour government to £7.5 billion.
The backlash was swift and it's escalating fast. For months, Rachel Reeves sold her reforms as a tough stand against privilege, insisting the wealthiest would finally pay more. But as details surface, that narrative is being challenged. Legal experts argue her personal financial arrangements reflect calculated tax planning, including overseas trusts and asset transfers executed ahead of major policy shifts. Then came the ruling from the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. In a decisive judgment, the justices found her structure appeared intentionally designed to limit exposure to the very system she helped create. Her estate is now under full review, with property and retirement assets frozen pending assessment, a development that has sharply intensified the political fallout.
Considering lowering the annual tax-free allowance is in an effort to push more people to invest in shares.
In more risky
because she wants to promote investment in British businesses. I mean, well, look, fine, but can we just be really blunt about this? ISAs are, one of the safest ways, perhaps, if you're moving into retirement or you're older person. That's sort of a safe place to put your money to provide additional income when you most need it at the end of your working life. Frankly, some of the people who are choosing to invest in cash ISAs now, they don't have the option of investing in shares because shares can take a long time to show a dividend or return. And frankly, if you're at the end of your getting towards the end of your certainly working life, you don't really have time necessarily to sit around and wait for those dividends or be able to weather, the ups and downs of shares because, as you say, they're riskier, they're not.
What infuriates many is the glaring double standard. Retirement savings that ordinary people spent decades building are now swept into taxable estates, and a modest home in a rising market can be enough to trigger a crushing inheritance bill. Yet Rachel Reeves is accused of structuring her own wealth through mechanisms she publicly criticized. Critics argue she didn't just leave loopholes open, she profited from them. The inheritance tax threshold remained frozen at £325,000 even as property values climbed nationwide, and pensions, including modest retirement funds, were brought into the taxable net. The result, more households pulled in than ever before, with the share of affected estates reportedly doubling from 5% to 10% in a single fiscal year. All the while, opponents claim, her own financial position was carefully arranged to limit exposure, a contrast that has intensified accusations of hypocrisy and deepened public frustration.
Trouble when I was in opposition, before they took over, so I used to say nice things about Rachel Reeves, a good, sensible woman, and she's still a very nice woman, and good and sensible. She's as boring as her Prime Minister, but that's a problem for the whole government. But she really disappointed me. It was bound to be an unpopular budget. She'd made this stupid promise not to use the normal toolbox of every chancellor. Mm-hmm. Apparently she wasn't going to raise income tax, she wasn't going to raise VAT, she wasn't going to raise national insurance, corporation tax. That's 70% of the revenue.
So it was
and
the
she
mistakes
slaps
in the election,
enormous taxes on employers. I would have raised, I think, VAT and fuel tax. So I'd have been hated, I'd have needed police protection. But in the national interest, that's what you're working towards in the first budget. And you don't put, in the present state of the economy, a big tax on employment in the way she has. The farmers, well, I'm rather on her side.
Even the Treasury's own projections signaled what was ahead. An additional 121,000 families each year facing heavy inheritance tax demands. Builders, tradespeople, lifelong savers, people who played by the rules, suddenly finding themselves penalized for modest success. Yet while that pressure mounted, Rachel Reeves reportedly repositioned her own assets behind complex legal structures. According to accounts surrounding the case, one judge described the arrangement as a deliberate maneuver within the very framework she imposed on others, not merely controversial, but strategically designed to limit personal exposure. Now the repercussions are unfolding rapidly. The ruling from the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom does more than freeze her fortune. It strikes at the heart of Labour Party's message on tax fairness. For months she was portrayed as a champion of working-class balance, the figure determined to tilt the system toward ordinary citizens. But the emerging reality has sharply challenged that image, turning a narrative of reform into one of credibility under fire.
Asking the public for 40 billion tax rises, can you at least reassure people there are no more tax rises after this?
Well, I've committed to just have one budget a year. I'm not coming back to this in the spring.
Parliament.
No, I'm not going to make commitments to never change taxes again. That would be irresponsible. But this is a once-in-a-Parliament budget to wipe the slate clean after the mess that the Conservatives have left us.
Just final question.
Labour Party's flagship tax policy has rapidly turned into a lightning rod for public anger. What was promoted as a targeted measure on the wealthy is now seen by critics as squeezing middle-income households, while those shaping the legislation appeared to sidestep its sharpest edges. The revelation that Rachel Reeves reportedly restructured her own family assets, while urging others to shoulder the burden, is being labeled by analysts as a profound breach of public trust. And the repercussions are still unfolding. Pressure is mounting for a wider inquiry, with members of Parliament calling for a full examination into whether this pattern extends beyond a single case. Was she alone in limiting exposure while advancing these reforms, or does this signal a deeper culture within the system? Public reaction has been fierce, and the political temperature continues to rise. Across social media, call-ins, and community forums, outrage isn't just simmering, it's explosive. People who reorganized their lives around Reeves' policies, selling homes, adjusting retirement plans, or shifting assets to protect their families, now feel the rug pulled from under them. Every calculated move, made in trust that the rules were fair, now feels like a betrayal. Entrepreneurs are speaking the loudest, questioning why they should pass on businesses when 40% of their lifetime's work could vanish overnight. This isn't merely a dispute over one estate, it's a crisis of confidence in leadership, exposing a system where those at the top dodge the sacrifices they demand from everyone else. When the rulemakers operate above the rules, trust erodes, and the vision they've been selling crumbles. This isn't just a scandal for Reeves, it's a flashpoint for the future of economic fairness itself. Reeves' policies weren't merely strict, they came wrapped in the promise of fairness, shared sacrifice, and leading by example. That illusion has shattered. What unfolds next could reshape the political map entirely. The court's ruling sets a precedent that may be used to challenge similar schemes across the government, and with pressure mounting, Labour is scrambling to contain the fallout. The backlash has been immediate, and is only intensifying. For months, Reeves painted her agenda as a fight against privilege, insisting the wealthiest must shoulder more of the burden. Behind that public posture, however, lay a different story. Legal experts now describe her personal financial arrangements as a masterclass in strategic avoidance, with overseas trusts and asset transfers carefully timed around major tax shifts. The Supreme Court's landmark decision left no room for ambiguity. Reeves' maneuvers weren't just shrewd, they crossed the line, exposing a stark gap between the rules for the powerful and the rest of the nation. Her financial maneuvers were deliberately engineered to dodge the very system she championed. Now her estate is under full review, with multiple assets, including property and retirement accounts, frozen and scrutinized for recovery. Public outrage boils over at the stark double standard. Ordinary citizens' pension savings, built over decades, are now taxable, and modest homes in booming markets trigger crushing inheritance bills, while Reeves shielded her wealth through the loopholes she publicly condemned. The hypocrisy is glaring. She didn't just fail to close gaps, she exploited them. She froze the inheritance tax threshold at £325,000 even as property values soared, redefined pensions as taxable estates, and expanded the number of affected families from 5% to 10% in a single year, all while crafting a personal escape plan. The message is clear, the rules are different for those at the top, and the public is furious.
I got into trouble when I was in opposition. Before they took over, so I used to say nice things about Rachel Reeves, a good, sensible woman, and she's still a very nice woman, and good and sensible. She's as boring as her Prime Minister, but that's a problem for the whole government. But she really disappointed me. It was bound to be an unpopular budget. She'd made this stupid promise not to use the normal toolbox of every chancellor. Mm-hmm. Apparently, she wasn't going to raise income tax, she wasn't going to raise VAT, she wasn't going to raise national insurance, corporation tax. That's 70% of the revenue.
So it was the
and she
mistakes
slaps
in the election.
Enormous taxes on employers. I would have raised, I think, VAT and fuel tax. So I'd have been hated, I'd have needed police protection. But in the national interest, that's what you're working towards in the first budget. And you don't put, in the present state of the economy, a big tax on employment in the way she has. The farmers, well, I'm rather on her side.
Insiders hint at a possible internal audit, but for many voters, the damage is already done. As the story continues to unfold, one fact stands out. Reeves' image as a champion of tax fairness is shattered, replaced by a cautionary tale of double standards, broken trust, and policies that punish the many while protecting the few. We'll continue tracking every development, bringing verified updates as they emerge. Like, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to stay informed. This has been Britain Info, keeping you ahead of the story.